There is a man sitting in the driver's seat of a 1994 Toyota Supra. He has not started the engine yet. His hands are on the steering wheel, his eyes are closed, he is not doing anything. He is just sitting there, completely still. For about 10 seconds, nothing happens. Then, slowly, he turns the key. The engine comes alive, and something on his face changes. Something that is very hard to explain, but very easy to recognize. This is not a rare moment. This exact scene has played out thousands of times. There are YouTube videos of grown men getting into their childhood dream cars for the first time and breaking down in tears. There are Reddit threads with hundreds of comments from people describing the exact same feeling. These are not unusual people. These are not people having a breakdown. This is a pattern, a generation-wide psychological pattern, and it deserves a real explanation. Millennials, the generation born between 1981 and 1996, grew up in a very specific moment in history. The 90s were not just a decade of fashion and pop music, they were a very particular psychological environment for children. And inside that environment, the car meant something it had never meant before, and has never quite meant since. For the first time, the car was being sold to young audiences not as a machine that takes you from one place to another, but as a symbol of something much larger: freedom, control, identity. Every ad, every movie, every television show in the 1990s carried the same message, that driving meant you were the one in charge of your own life. Children absorbed this at exactly the age when their brains were most open to it. Developmental psychologists have identified a window between the ages of 8 and 14 where the brain is doing something very specific. It is not just learning facts and skills, it is building a self. It is deciding, mostly unconsciously, what kind of person it wants to become. Whatever produces a strong emotional response during this window does not get stored as an ordinary memory. The brain gives it a different kind of weight, a different kind of permanence, and for millions of children in the 90s, the thing producing that strong emotional response was a car, a specific car, the one on the poster, the one in the video game, the one in the film. But here is the part that most people miss entirely. The brain did not just store a picture of the car. It stored the feeling the car represented. Neuroscientists call this sensory imprinting. When something is experienced for the first time alongside intense emotion, the brain creates what is essentially a sensory blueprint: the sound, the texture, the smell, the physical sensation of that moment. Decades later, when those same sensations are encountered again, the brain does not process them as new information. It says something much more powerful. It says, "I know this. I have been here before. This is home." This is why the engine sound matters so much. This is why millennial men who finally sit in their dream car describe the experience not as excitement, but as recognition. They are not discovering something new. They are returning to something old, something the brain has been quietly holding on to for 30 years. And then there were the video games. Gran Turismo arrived on the PlayStation in 1997 and did something that no medium had done before for a generation of children. It did not just show them the cars. It put them inside the cars. It made them shift gears, take corners, feel the weight of the machine, respond to their decisions. The brain at that age cannot fully distinguish between a simulated physical experience and a real one. It practices. It stores. And so millions of children developed something that sounds strange but is neurologically accurate. A kind of false muscle memory. A physical familiarity with cars they had never actually touched. This is why, when millennials finally drive their dream car as adults, something unexpected happens. It does not feel foreign. It feels familiar. The brain says, "I already know how to do this," because in a very real sense, it does. But to understand why driving this specific car carries so much emotional weight, you have to understand something about the millennial experience of adulthood. This is a generation that has watched an unusual amount of their life happen outside of their control. They entered the workforce during the 2008 financial collapse. They bought homes during impossible markets. They built careers during a decade of stagnant wages. They lived through a global pandemic that rearranged everything they thought they understood about how life works. Control for this generation has not been a reliable feeling, and this matters enormously when you understand what driving an analog car actually does to the nervous system. A 1994 Supra has no driver assistance, no lane correction, no algorithm quietly making decisions on your behalf. The steering wheel vibrates in your hands. The engine responds directly and immediately to what your foot does. There is nothing between you and the machine. Psychologists who study the relationship between humans and environments describe this as direct agency, the experience of your actions producing immediate, unmediated results. For a generation that has spent most of its adult life feeling like outcomes are determined by systems far beyond their reach, this feeling is not just pleasant, it is corrective. It is the thing the nervous system has been quietly asking for. Fast and Furious arrived in 2001 and made this even more specific. The film did not sell these cars as status symbols. It did not say that rich people drive them. It built an entire moral identity around them. The characters who drove these cars were loyal and skilled and free. They belonged to something real. And for teenagers watching that film, the brain was not simply entertained. It was filing information about who it wanted to become. Neuroscientists call this prospective memory consolidation, the adolescent brain rehearsing its future self. The car was not just something those characters owned. It was something they were. And the brain, at 15 years old, made a decision it would not consciously remember making. It added the car to the plan. Then adulthood arrived and quietly took it off the table. The practical car came first, reliable, sensible, affordable to insure. The dream car became something that would happen later. Later became a shelf. The shelf became background noise. But goal persistence research shows something important. Deferred goals do not weaken over time. They accumulate weight. Every year that passes without resolution adds to the psychological pressure behind the thing that was left unfinished. The car was no longer just a car. It had become evidence of a version of life that had been promised and never delivered. So when the moment finally comes, when the keys are handed over, when the door closes, when the engine turns on, what happens is not proportionate to the object. A 40-year-old man does not cry because a car is beautiful. He cries because he is not 40 years old in that moment. He is 12. He is the version of himself that sat in front of a television and felt, for the first time, that the world was large and that his place in it was still wide open. That version of himself never went away. He was just waiting. Psychologist Dan McAdams has spent decades studying how humans understand their own lives. His research consistently shows that people need their life to feel like a coherent story, one that has a beginning, a middle, and a direction. When a chapter is left unfinished, the mind keeps returning to it. It cannot move forward cleanly until that chapter has some resolution. Driving the childhood dream car is not a midlife crisis. It is not regression. It is narrative repair. It is the person finally writing the sentence that was left hanging for 30 years. And there is one more thing. We live now in a world that is almost entirely made of screens and interfaces and systems that process our decisions for us. The millennial generation is the last one that remembers a life before all of that. A life where things were physical and immediate and real. These cars were built in that world. They carry that world in their metal and their sound and their feel. When a millennial drives one, they are not just driving a car. They are touching something from a time when reality felt different. When your hands on a wheel meant something, when speed was a sensation you could feel in your chest and not just a number on a display. It is not nostalgia. It is reconnection. It is the nervous system finding something it did not know it had been missing. The man on the highway now has his windows down. The engine sounds exactly the way it sounded in the game. Exactly the way it sounded in the film. Exactly the way it sounded, in the part of his brain that never stopped waiting for this. He is not running from his life. He is not pretending to be young. He is finishing something. He is becoming, finally and completely, the person he always planned to be. Not chasing the past, arriving, at last, at himself.